Got it, Douglas.
Now streaming on YouTube.
So I think it takes Ron an extra second to link that to Facebook, I believe.
I didn't know he was linking it to Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on.
He tells me that he has done what he needed to do. So I think we are live and good to go. Rick, if you want to
I'm ready.
call us to order.
Yeah, I now call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and public were duly notified in accordance with state law. First item on the agenda is approval of prior minutes. Have a motion anywhere?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes are approved. Next business is the make a recommendation on the MOU with the Water Commission.
Or whatever they're called.
Whatever they're called.
So I received a couple of comments from Bill, and I got a comment that I sent you this morning from Chris Jordan about the overall cost of the project. The manager there sent me a comment. I have tried to, you all haven't seen it. Bill, I've sent it to you since you were the primary author of the amendments. I've tried to put their comments in. But as we kind of talked about last month, it is basically the same MOU that we sent to them prior, updated a little bit to indicate that the master plan project had been completed. Also explain that we would be working on a more detailed MOU in the next year, and took out comments about there being a funding plan in place, and added a comment that they would periodically update us on their construction schedule as it rolls forward. So it's generally the same MOU, a couple of tweaks from last month. If there's consensus among you, I think the appropriate thing to do would be to make, we'd be looking for recommendation from this group to the city council to recommend approval of it. And then we would start working on a follow-up MOU with more detail.
I would make that as a motion.
I would second that so we can have discussion.
Yeah. I have a little discussion on this one, Doug. The item, I guess it's line 18 now, if I'm not mistaken. You have on there, the WSC agrees to periodically provide the city with reports on the progress made to decommission the Wild Dunes wastewater facility. Got that?
Yep, I'm looking at it.
Good. The way I read that, that's all it includes is the decommissioning of the Wild Dunes facility. Doesn't include anything to do with the new stuff.
Well, so the new stuff being, so in order to decommission that facility, they have to obviously build the new facility. You want it to include specific construction of the new facility at Forest Trail to allow for the decommissioning of the Wild Dunes plant?
Yep.
Okay, I can do that.
Let me give you some wording that you may want to.
Okay, go ahead.
Hold on a second. Oh, there we are. Okay. The WSC agrees to supply to the city at least monthly a report or presentation detailing the forecasted spending versus budget, construction progress versus timetable, and any unexpected events that occurs with the project.
Real good.
Rick, can you email that language to me?
Sure.
I would just say we would be holding them to a higher standard than we hold ourselves to. If you all want to do that, I think that's fine. I'm sure they're doing it. I'm sure they'd be happy to do it, but it does seem like a pretty rigorous thing to put into a generic MOU. But if that's the will of the group, I'm happy with it, and I don't think they'd see any objection with it.
Okay, should we?
Can we agree this is going to be the final adjustment to the MOU and you can just go forward with it? You don't need to bring it back to us. You just print it out and send it over to them?
That's for you all to decide. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, want to make a motion?
So made.
There's already one I think there's already one in process, isn't there, Nicole? Yeah.
Yes, one on the floor ready to approve it and send it over to city council, and then to with the intention of working on a more detailed MOU in the next 12 months.
Yeah, I will amend the motion to include Rick's recommendation.
Thank you, Bill.
I'll resecond that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
And Rick, you'll send that to me, right?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Okay. Next order of business is the review of the comprehensive plan.
Didn't you add something, Douglas?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's the island-wide sewer expansion.
Yeah, the reason I brought that up, I've had Jimmy again make a couple of comments, the mayor make a couple of comments to me about how important that is, the island-wide sewer system. And I had the feeling that he thinks that we're kind of working on it, or somebody's working on it. And I wanted to know where we stand with regard to the council. What do they think we're doing with this, if anything? And so that's why I put it on the board. And if people do expect us to be working on it, then what are we doing?
So I think you just established a 1-year time frame for this group to create a more detailed roadmap of how to do that. I think that's what the plan is to do, is to work over the next course of the year to develop a more detailed roadmap of doing that.
Then we need some sort of outline or plan, right, for that year.
Yes.
Okay, so we need to do that, right? I guess that's the next item on the agenda. Not the formal agenda, but I mean.
Right.
So what do you suggest?
Well, I think that we need to, we basically have a year to work with the Water and Sewer Commission to come up with a more detailed roadmap. So I would think our first step would be to meet with their staff, talk about it, get ideas together, and put together a roadmap of path forward.
Okay, so we would sit down with them and basically outline our plan with them.
I think so. And I sent the prior work, which is now, I mean, it's only whatever it is, 2 or 3 years old. Yeah. And for the newer members, there was several years spent getting to that point. And at the end of that road, it was basically agreed upon that the funding hurdle was too big to get over without some kind of, help in the form of grants or something other than just rate increases or tax increases. There was no clear path forward there. To me, none of that has gotten any rosier. I mean, it's the same. I think we're in the same set of conditions that we will. I do think that we'll have to come up with a pretty aggressive policy of pursuing grants. And the city had put a grant writer in the budget for this year. So hopefully we can identify grants and get some grants. We also have the luxury of the city and the Water and Sewer Commission is using the same engineering firm, and that engineering firm has a grant arm to it that alerts both of us anytime they identify a grant that could help either one of us. They let us know about it. They'll also give us kind of their take on how likely a reward would be, and they will give us their pricing if we want them to pursue it on our behalf. So we're kind of doing that now in the background. There have been a couple of opportunities come up. None seem to really fit any of the projects on our end anyway. And I don't know if the Water and Sewer Commission is pursuing something differently, but so we are pretty actively pursuing grants. But all of this, I think, is what we would sit down with the Water and Sewer Commission staff and talk through and work through.
Hey, Douglas, this is Scott. Just a quick question. I was seeing the numbers kind of floating around on Bill's memo and some other things. It sounded like rough numbers with the adjustments. It's like 50 some odd $1 million to do the island-wide capacity engineering and development. And I think one of the questions that kind of comes around too, does that even include the off ramps into the connections, or is that basically just the highway to get the infrastructure in and get the plant up to be able to handle the capacity, and excluding the off ramps to the connections to the actual 1,400 or so septic units?
I think that gets it to the public. To the private property line. So
it doesn't hook it up though.
It does not go from the private property line up into the house. That would be, and I think they've estimated an additional $1,200 per house.
Per house, okay.
To run that.
So, and I guess back to your other comment about we still kind of, I mean, that's a big number with the 50, whatever, whether it's 50 to 60 million. Is there maybe a two-pronged approach where we could look at things like you've already done with some ordinances and such, where try to come up with either some additional incentive programs for people to hook up, trying to equalize? It always seems like the last hurdle is laying what is a variable cost on the individual homeowner to either be first in the neighborhood, first in the street, or what have you. Can we maybe look at some plans or incentives to chip away at it rather than try to do this all at once? I mean, would these could be parallel efforts?
That would be my hope. And I do know that the Water and Sewer Commission is creating a fund. Well, that it's at least their chairman's wish that they create a fund to have money available for each time. The way this is happening now is somebody wants to build a house, they look into it, they see a price tag of $100,000 to extend the line, and then they go an alternate route. I think the Water and Sewer Commission is wanting to create a fund that would be available to basically partner with that owner, with the understanding that they would ultimately recoup, the Water and Sewer Commission would ultimately recoup the portion that they contribute through the others tying in, because our ordinances will eventually require that they tie in. We have these things saying if the sewer line is in front of your house and you build something, or you substantially improve, or you sell the house, you're going to have to tie in. We've already put those triggers in. And I think the Water and Sewer Commission would basically fund a portion of the expansion, knowing that our ordinances will force those others to tie in and have to pay their portion of the fees. And then they would ultimately be made whole, and then they could reinvest that money back into that fund. And hopefully it would over time kind of be a self-funding thing where people are paying it back, and that's contributing to additional expansions. So I do think it's going to, I personally think that's really the path forward. I think that's how it happens. There are going to be certain kind of monumental tasks within that of getting pump stations built. You know, there's going to be a point where a little line will reach its limit without a pump station, and then there's going to need to be a pretty major interjection of cash at that point. That, you know, we're going to have to figure that out, or the Water and Sewer Commission is going to have to figure that out.
Well, I guess what I'm hearing is that two things. Number one, we can work the engineering all day long, and it's not going to change that number much. And even if the number changes, it's such a big number, it's not going to have any major effect. The question is, how are you going to pay for it?
Exactly.
And that's a concern we have as well as they have. And what you're saying is we need to get together and work on that to come up with a plan that we're not duplicating work, but we're coming up with a plan that works for both sides.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it would be good to, you know, there has not, in my mind, there's also not been a political will to finance that big a number.
The big one, yeah.
And I think we should, that's kind of a starting point to me, to assume, you know, I know that people like to talk about making the expansions and we want to do this and we need to do this, but immediately when the number and how you attack that number comes up, you know, it gets very quiet in the room. So I think
that number, by the way, is greater than the entire net position of both the entire city and the Water and Sewer Commission combined.
Yeah,
so, yeah, I think that's a big
Well,
number.
the thing is that number keeps changing. Before, when we did this, I guess 3 years ago, we thought the number was going to be around $52 million, and that included moving Wild Dunes over to Forest Trail, the water treatment plant. Now we find out that 52 million doesn't include Wild Dunes, and Wild Dunes isn't $7 million, it's $19 million. So, you know, we spent a lot of time on this before, and unless there's something that's changing dramatically or council is really committed to getting this done, I hate to see the Planning Commission spend another year or more messing with this and nothing is going to happen again. We don't have any way to pay for this.
Well, have the ordinance, and this is before my time, but it sounds like the ordinances you passed recently or within the last couple of years has had a positive impact, at least, you know, chipping away at the new and maybe getting some of the old to hook up. Is that a fair
But they're a
statement?
drop in the bucket to the 1,450 people that are on septic.
Which then goes to the incentive. How do you incrementally try to incentivize even the lower hanging fruit?
And many of those people are perfectly happy with what they have.
Yeah.
Most of them are happy with what they have.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with both of you. I think that the ordinances are having an effect. And we will really, when we enacted those ordinances, one of the goals was to just create some data points of, because we didn't, you know, when it really came to figuring out how much it costs, how much is it going to cost an owner to do this, we really didn't know. We started with a number like 500 feet. You know, if you're within 500 feet, you have to extend it. But fear of the unknown crept in, and we realized we don't know how much that would cost, and we don't know the burden we're putting on that person building the house. So I do think that we're at least kind of building up a few data points that after a year, 18 months, we can look back and look at the projects that took place, look at the expense of those. And potentially, I think if there is a willingness to participate financially in those little projects, it would probably allow us to extend that distance from 150 feet to something more. And I think that's really where it starts to kind of naturally grow. If we're requiring anybody within, say, 500 feet of a sewer line to extend it, but we know that there's going to be a contribution by the Water and Sewer Commission or the city or both that helps offset the cost, then I think it really could start to kind of grow at a pretty decent clip.
You know what might be helpful too, not to assign more work, but if we know what the baseline was when we started working on this 3 years ago about how many people are not hooked to sewer. So updating that periodically as to who has finally tied into sewer or put a grinder pump in. So we get a new number, and maybe that will affect that $54 million to eventually drop, because instead of 1,450 people, it's now 1,300. Yeah, you know, it maybe we get to see the effectiveness of some of these ordinances we're doing.
Yeah, the thing that pains me, I walk the dogs a lot, and walking by these brand new homes that haven't even been occupied yet, and they've got out front a beautiful grinder pump.
Yeah,
You know, it's frustrating.
it is frustrating.
Well, what about getting together? What do you think?
Well, I don't know what the will, and we can talk about this, but to me, I had thought that roundtable discussions like that were probably best held until we could meet in person.
Yeah, that's.
I don't know what the will of the group is. If you all feel like these are just as productive, I think Bill has the opinion that they may not be, but that was just kind of my personal feeling. I also feel like with the comprehensive plan and that review on our agenda, that we're pretty heavily loaded on our agendas kind of at this immediate moment. So I guess I had envisioned we would delay for a couple of months before we started that process with them. But if you all want to start discussions with them next month, I'm sure they'll do it as well.
Douglas, does the city policy prohibit us from meeting in person? If we were to go into the council chambers and have our meeting where you could social distance, do they not want us to do that?
I had a brief conversation. The council doesn't want to do that.
I don't know if it would, if us being consistent with council, there's not an ordinance against it. I don't think there's a prohibition against it. It may be that, consistency, that there would be a desire to just be consistent in what we're doing. But having said that, I can't see that it would hurt if we want to do, while this thing is kind of playing itself out, if we wanted to go to an optional thing where some of us, if there was interest, and I planned on talking about this in miscellaneous business, but I guess we can talk about it now. If a handful wanted to meet physically and those that didn't want to meet were tied in via Zoom, I think we could do that. And we could tie in the public via YouTube. I think that may be an option if some are comfortable, some are not comfortable. But to answer your question, Bill, there's not a prohibition against it. I think it may just be perceived as inconsistent.
I think that's an important distinction. So would the plan be to not permit anyone from the public to come into the room, only the commission members, and only tie the public in through remotely?
That's how I would envision it.
Okay.
Where public comment and public viewing is still done as it is now. That they're doing court across the hallway right now, and it takes considerable manpower to limit. Basically, there are people lined out in front of City Hall, and they're being called in kind of one at a time. So I wouldn't want to go through that.
Yeah.
And so I think it would be, I think we would limit public input to the way it's being done now is again, kind of what I would envision.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that'd be a much easier way to control the environment for sure.
By the way, you mentioned public comments. I'm assuming we had none for this meeting.
That's correct. We have, I'll verify with Ron that we didn't, but it's my understanding that we did not.
Yeah, getting back on track where we were before, I think delaying for 2 or 3 months or 4 months or X amount of time, the sewer project is a good one and a good idea. I think we ought to vote on it, and if we pass it, then at least we know where we're going, rather than have it just dangling out there.
You can vote on it that you need to, but if you want to, that's fine.
How would we word it? Just 3 months?
Rick, are we just proposing to just defer putting it back on the agenda, say until September, October?
Yep.
Yep. We can probably just do that. Yeah.
Scott, you want to make that motion?
Sure, make a motion to defer the sewer conversation until what do you all want to do? October, November? October. Why don't we put it on the October agenda and then we can revisit it then?
Sounds good. I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Comprehensive plan.
So by my recollection, you all got through the goals and strategies of natural resources. There was, we kind of ran out of time when it came time to get into the text of that element. So I think we were going to finish reviewing the text of that element and then try to get into the transportation element, and then also review the changes made between this meeting and your previous meeting.
Douglas?
Goals and strategies in the natural resources section.
I think we made it to goal 3. We stopped at 3.5 last time.
Yes.
Yeah, and then we had added a new goal about air quality. So I think we had a couple of little things left on the natural resources before we got on transportation, I think.
Did we not do 3.5
That's
last time?
where we stopped.
Okay.
Well, look.
I think we hit the 3-hour mark by then, or 2-hour mark.
Plus 2.5 hours.
We were all a little worn out, I think. Yeah.
Douglas, at what point do you envision us getting community input into the comprehensive plan?
Well, so I would, and this is also a good point for discussion. I would envision that you all would take what I will call your first pass, which I think we're doing now. And I think that kind of gives you all an idea of what needs to be updated, what needs to be corrected. And I think that we then try and we'll talk about how to do it. But at that point, we will try to vet this through the community and get community feedback on what goals they would have, what shortcomings they see in the plan, and then go back to what I would kind of call a fine tuning with the comments made by the public. So that's how I think we've kind of talked about it in general terms, that you all would take a first pass. We then go to the public with it, take that feedback, try to refine it, and then go forward with city council. I don't have, and we'll get to this point where we will need to discuss the best methods for getting that public vetting. We should also, when we're talking about that, and I've kind of wanted to put this in to each of your minds as something to consider, but we do We have previously identified portions that we need professional input on, and then met with those professionals to just kind of talk through technical issues, or so just keep that in the back of your mind, that that's a tool that we have typically done. I mean, if we get to talking about public safety or public facilities or public works, we historically have pulled in those experts when we needed them. So, anybody have any comments for goal 3.5 and the natural resources?
Or do you want to follow the same format? They're listed just kind of going across the sheet there and seeing, yeah. Mike? Move.
So 3.5, the goal: protect the island's wildlife and vegetation. Strategy 3.51, pursue enforcement of ordinances aimed at protecting loggerhead nesting activities and sites. Do we think that supports the vision statement?
Yep.
Yes.
Do we think that's status green? I don't know of any real enforcement issues that we've had. I would think that we're green there.
Yes.
I would agree.
Measure of success.
I guess that's based on the, what the number of nests or thing. I mean, I don't think we're going to be counting that, but I don't know how we would measure that for this particular one.
I mean, I guess the measure, a high percentage of nesting sites successfully, I guess, hatching, right? Would that be a measure?
Yeah, and they've been breaking records, right?
Yeah.
This season they have?
I think so.
Okay.
Assigned or funded. That's enforcement would be I guess that's DNR. I guess within the city that would be the police, but I think technically if you were to mess with a loggerhead site, I think that involves DNR. But probably the PD would be the local assignment.
First.
Do we feel like, do we need any additional notes or comments on that or updates? I guess I'm gathering, Scott, you and Rick, you all stay somewhat tied in with the turtle team. Is that accurate?
I can't say that I have, but
No, me neither.
my run's on the beach.
How are you aware that we're having a breaking season?
Oh, news, just the news.
Is that's in the local news?
Now, I don't know what's going to happen lately, but I don't know if they're still out there in force doing what they normally do. But
all right, so let's move on to 3.52. Support other regulations that protect wildlife and vegetation. You know, the most common one here, and when I hear vegetation, is tree protection ordinances, which you all have periodically kind of reviewed and modified.
Do you want to call that out, Douglas, or do you recommend?
Say that again, Scott.
Do you recommend we call that out, the tree specifically, when you think of the vegetation, or just add that to the wording somewhere?
I think it's good as it sits. You know, it is interesting that it's assigned to the general government and police department. It would seem as though the building department is kind of the front lines of trees.
Yeah.
So that we may need to be added there.
I agree.
And there's also the sea oats and other coastal vegetation that's probably, again, a DNR or OCRM. I think, trying to recall who posts those signs to keep up the dunes.
OCRM is going to post those.
So change it to general government, police, and planning department or building department?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I think that's a pretty debate that supports the vision.
I would say so, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say that's green and status.
Yep.
I don't know if a measure there.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Just a general question. You know, when I went back after our last meeting and kind of tried to put the comments from that meeting into the text of the existing comprehensive plan, I got a little, I guess I was unclear on how the group envisioned. Do we envision taking out the current goals and strategies pages and inserting this kind of matrix system? Or are we thinking of this matrix as being an appendix in the back of the plan, and we'd have the text in each element and then a matrix in the back? Or any thought? And Scott, I know you know, having created this, did you have thoughts as to how this would physically show up in the plan?
You know, I haven't really got that far. I think when you sent around the updated Word document, that's probably sufficient. I don't know that we want to put all this you know, into the body of the plan. And I think we were talking at one point about making an online version and kind of updating it and on the packaging. I think this was meant for us to just walk through and hopefully it helped last time. I think we omitted some of the goals. We updated some of the words. When you get into the measurements on some of these, they were, this is a little bit more defined, but I guess my opinion would be that I didn't envision necessarily this matrix being necessarily in the body of the, I think that makes it a little bit easier to edit and update from your perspective, hopefully, than to try to weave these into words.
Yes, it would. It does make it easier, but you know, I actually liked particularly the measures of success in the funding columns. To me, I mean, maybe that's too nitty gritty for the casual reader, but I do think that's extremely helpful. And
Yeah.
I guess that led me to think about, you know, potentially just a working matrix in the back of the plan as an appendix.
Well, and if we have a goal and objective and it's not funded, then there's not much we can do about it. It's one of these things, I think that may help council or whoever's allocating capital or expense dollars down the road. If one of these become a priority, they'll know whether it's got to be funded.
Yeah.
So, and what the measure of success is, it's a little bit clearer, you know, what we're trying to define as you know, what would have to be funded.
So would that be agreeable to everybody? We'd leave it as general kind of reading text in the body of the plan, but then maybe have a set of appendix with the actual matrices.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, good. So how about the body of the remainder of the body of that text of the natural resources section? The big one to me that comes to mind is this idea, and I think we've talked about it generally, but not really specifically how to incorporate it. But to get into this, to get into the idea of resiliency, kind of planning for sea level rise, that kind of level, you know, as we had said, the city of Charleston has a standalone plan dealing with sea level rise. Charleston County incorporated a sea level rise element. So where we have, I think we have 8 elements now, they have a 9th element that's resiliency. I looked at a couple of others have, there's some press currently about the town of Somerville. They're about a year ahead of us on their update. And they have added resiliency to the natural resources section. So I think we could go any one of those 3 routes, either add it as a heading in this element, add it as its own element, or I don't think I don't see the benefit in doing an entirely separate plan, which is what the city of Charleston did. Any thoughts on, and I guess if we were going to add it as an element or put it into this element, now would be the time to talk about it.
When I think of the word resiliency, I think more in line with the strategic plan and scenario planning, to be specific. And I know that's something else that we're considering and doing under a separate cover. So, you know, I'm not saying that we couldn't make mention of it here, but I guess that would be my only comment.
We could, you know, that process, I think, from what I'm hearing, is kind of getting off the ground now. At least our staff is talking to their staff and organizing the meetings for that. So I think that's pretty close on the horizon. Do we want to wait until that process kicks off to decide what to do with that? And we'll just kind of leave it as a hanging item?
As a placeholder for now?
Placeholder.
Right. Yep.
I'll tell you what, since I know myself well enough to know that I will forget if I don't physically insert it somewhere.
There you go.
Why don't we put in this draft at the end of it, basically another heading, and it'll just say resiliency. And then I'm just going to put a blurb there that explains what we've just talked about. We're going to wait to see how the strategic plan kicks off. And then we'll, you know, I think we've got a long way to go, but we could at least put the placeholder in this element for the time being.
I think that's a great idea, and you can always come back to it.
Yeah. Okay.
So a placeholder within natural resources is what we're talking about, or a separate tab? Okay.
Into natural resources is what I was saying. And then we could decide later if it gets its own tab, it gets its own plan, or it's sufficiently covered in the strategic plan.
You know, you can play games with this, that resiliency is the major title and natural resources is the subtitle.
Yeah, I think that's actually what the town of Somerville did. I think they've put it.
Wow.
They've put it into basically the title.
Huh.
All right, so we'll have it as a new header in this element, and we'll just wait to see kind of what happens.
Yep.
Okay, just so I'm clear, like as a separate goal we're talking about, goal header?
Well, I'm putting it in the body of the text. So right now you'll see that there's kind of, with it, there's water quality. As you go through natural resources, there's characteristics, flooding, water quality, beach, wildlife and vegetation. And I would just add this as an additional, whatever that is, paragraph, set of paragraphs, I guess.
Okay. Should we move on?
Yep. Any other comments on that, on the text of that section?
No.
I've got one. I'll apologize. I wasn't able to participate the last time, but what was the thinking in eliminating 321? Just because of the age of the document, or is there more to it than that?
You're talking about the original 321.
That's correct.
Yes, I think that it's my recollection that we felt like primarily age. That study is now 12 years old, 13 years old, something like that. And that the remaining strategies basically got to the same point as that strategy. So it was kind of old, outdated and slightly duplicative.
Well, it may be outdated, but I don't know that the recommendations that they had are obsolete. Are you aware of the recommendations? They had 9 recommendations there that seem to be pretty pertinent in that report.
Well, I guess I don't know them, but I can assume, and I think I was part of the conversation, but they were so long ago that they were, for whatever reason, not enacted. What are they, Bill? Can you?
Well, I'll just read a couple of them briefly. So, public information should be used to instruct citizens and visitors about the importance of properly cleaning up after pets, not only in public areas, but also in private yards. Explore methods that would deter or control the wild animal population on the island. These methods could include reducing wild animal population through trapping, relocating animals to other areas, educate citizens about ways to reduce the attraction of certain animal species, explore the use of vegetated buffers along the stormwater discharges to filter stormwater runoff before it discharges into the ditches in Hamlin Creek. I won't read all of them to you, but I think many of them still are useful recommendations. I just wondered what the thinking was to not continue to include these.
I'd have to go back to the tape, Bill, but I think some of the conversation was that the other subsequent, there was quite a bit of overlap or possible overlap. I think you definitely read off a couple of new ones, but that there was some overlap between 3.2, 3.3. If you look at strategy 3.3.1, they talk about the education and awareness program, protective dunes, marshes, vegetation as well as important, removing animal waste, trash, etc. So I think that kind of some of that conversation came into it too, but you definitely named some additional ones.
Well, so Bill, maybe if maybe that was the problem, that basically the recommendations themselves were not part of the plan, so that the two became disjointed, and I don't know that so maybe we identify and pull out the ones that are useful or worthwhile, and we kind of drill in on each individual. Instead of referencing the old plan, we analyze the actual recommendations there.
Well, one of them is also continued to strengthen ordinances and encourage periodic inspection and pump out of septic systems. I know that was tried once before and apparently failed, but
yeah.
Anyway, I guess I wonder why they were discarded without, I know we didn't pay any attention to them for 14 years. But.
Well, and I guess the public awareness, 331 still gets at the public awareness. And I guess 352, the goal of 3.5 gets to the other, the ideas of vegetative buffers and picking up your dog's waste and things like that are, I guess, kind of covered in 3.5, the goal 3.5. So maybe we pull out the meaningful recommendations in that plan and put them into these other goals.
I'd like to do that.
Okay. There has been going through there has been a renourishment project. This is kind of the beach element, the beach section there kind of gives a chronology of beach projects. There has been an additional beach project for nourishment. And we should add a paragraph, I think, to discuss. Anything else there? All right, so I think without any other comments, we ready to go into transportation?
We talked about one new goal, Doug, was 3.6, improve the air quality of the island.
Yeah, I guess we have not put any.
Yeah.
We haven't put any strategies there. Any thoughts on that one?
I don't know how we would do that.
Yeah, other than regulating smoking on the beach.
Yeah.
The thing that comes to my mind is the vehicle traffic and the large trucks, construction vehicles, and maintenance vehicles, things like that.
Anything that we could do about that?
Yeah.
I don't know how much methane we're generating with our septic tanks.
True. And I don't want to step on a third rail here, but maybe parking, reducing some of the parking on the island could improve air quality by reducing some of the traffic.
To me, that would be, we do so many of these issues kind of cross through multiple elements. I think that, to me personally, that would be more in the transportation.
Transportation.
And that's, to me, that issue is the challenges, the public safety response challenges, and just mobility challenges that come with congestion. More than, it certainly is an issue.
So I think one thing some other municipalities do, they have like idling ordinances. I think the no smoking ordinance was another that's already been addressed. Those could be a couple of unique strategies, but I don't know what the appetite would be to even look at something like that here. Yeah, the smoking ordinance, I think, is pretty well established for public spaces and beach.
Right.
So that one's pretty much done. I don't know, would there be any benefit to putting it in the comprehensive plan to maintain it, or is it something that it's already done, so no need for that?
Well, what about putting something in here that we support mass transportation somehow? We have somebody on the what's this, CARTA?
We do. I would say again that is a
Transportation.
something we should pursue, but I think it's best handled under the transportation
Okay.
element.
So
Well,
are the two things that are not addressed, that might be, say, traffic volume and public transportation. Smoking's already done, so are we actually going to be solving for air quality over in the transportation section? I guess maybe that's the question.
Yeah.
And do we even need it here in the natural resources section?
Well, do we want to, I guess I think it's a good goal. I don't think anybody would argue with the goal that it's a good goal.
Right.
I would want a strategy, but maybe it's just that it has to be a somewhat generic strategy, like some of the ones above it, that basically we just pursue enforcement of ordinances, or we support ordinances that work towards improving air quality, such as smoking bans or anything that would reduce congestion, something just kind of generic as a strategy.
I don't see a need for it, but I'm not opposed to it.
A whole goal, Bill, you want, or just the
I
strategy?
don't know how we have any control of that, of the air quality.
Maybe just a general statement in one of the upfront sections that says, this is an ideal that we support, but we feel like it's going to be accomplished by other limiting factors and other aspects of the comprehensive plan. We acknowledge the fact that it's, been considered, but there's other policies in place that are going to, like I said, be the limiting factor there to help improve air quality.
Maybe we should just take it out.
Well, I just, for generic, what do we say? Pursue development and implementation of ordinances, education and awareness programs to improve air quality, such as smoking regulations and support of public transportation.
Yeah, that's good.
Send that to me, Scott.
Okay.
Everybody like that?
Yeah, I like it.
Sure.
We'll have that in there as a goal with a strategy, and it'll be somewhat generic.
Yeah. All right.
It's not to say that we can't have a strategy appear at two different places at the same time. Nothing wrong with that either. I mean, okay.
On to transportation.
Yep.
So earlier in the meeting, before we get there, and maybe I did receive a response from Ron about public comment section.
But those are old. I read through them, and those were meant to be for July. Because they both refer to things that have already happened in July. Parking.
Okay.
So
So
they're
they
not,
may have just missed the July, they probably missed the July
yeah.
deadline. Okay. All right, parking, or transportation rather. We're gonna start with a matrix.
Sure.
All right, goal 8.1. Improve traffic flow and reduce congestion on the roadways of the island. Seems like easily supportable. Strategies. Continually assess stop sign. Would it be helpful? I think last time I put these up, didn't I? I tell you what, assess stop sign locations on the island to determine proper and legal placement. I do think that, I do know that it's just a regular course of doing business. If a stop sign is noticed, it's pretty quickly reported and I think fixed. So I think it's interesting to me, not that they take any level of importance being higher up, but it is interesting to me that that's the first strategy. I kind of see that as a non-issue. I don't know. Does anybody else?
I had it on my notes that we could probably delete the first two strategies.
My question about the stop signs is the placement, not necessarily where they are, what roads they're on, but where they're placed, because many of them are placed beyond where you would cross the street. And I wondered if that's what they meant by that strategy. Normally you would have a stop sign so people stop before they get to the crosswalk. Many of our stop signs are placed so they run over you when you're in the crosswalk to get to the stop sign. And believe me, most people don't stop at the stop sign anyhow.
Is there a specific? I'm trying to think of where there's a
Many of the crossroads on the numbered streets where they're coming out onto Palm Boulevard, there really is no crosswalk, but where the sidewalk would normally go across the street, the stop sign is in front of that towards Palm Boulevard. So if people are going to stop at the stop sign, which is, I was always taught that's where you should stop, they're already over the crosswalk before they get to the stop sign.
So are you on Palm Boulevard? The side?
Oh, I'm on the cross street. I'm on 25th or 26th or 27th, turning on to Palm Boulevard.
Yeah, but so you're saying that the sidewalk on Palm Boulevard is way back from the edge of the roadway. It's like 40 feet back from the edge of Palm Boulevard.
I don't know how far back it is. I'm just telling you where the placement of the stop sign is.
Yeah, that is an issue for sure.
So if I may, at public safety, the other morning, that if I'm following this correctly, that sort of displacement of the stop lines and the crosswalks did come up. And I know that Chief Cornett was going to be reaching out to DOT about that particular issue. As it happens, they're incongruent in several places around the island. So if it's the same thing we're talking about, he's looking into that.
Have there never been crosswalks, marked crosswalks across the street? There's very few places on our island where there's an actual designated crosswalk.
Yeah, there historically have not been, and over the last 20 years, there's been maybe 3 or 4 added on Palm Boulevard between 21st and 41st. I do know it takes going through the DOT to get encroachment permits and but yeah, I don't think if anything, we are increasing the number of crosswalks periodically. And I know that, there's a little bit of friction there between drivers wanting to be able to get where they're going and the pedestrians trying to get across the road safely. It's always a give and take a little bit there.
Going back to Marty's comments, I kind of agree with what Marty's saying though. The strategy 8.1 and 8.1 and 8.1.2, they're more sort of tactical, daily things that the public safety team should be assessing rather than a strategy, do you think? Or
Yeah, I mean, for instance, even part of what we were just discussing, the improving pedestrian safety is included in 8.1.3. So that could really encompass the whole debate about stop sign locations in a more
yeah,
general.
the top two are kind of tactics or day-to-day things, whereas the third one is the strategy, would you say? Or
Yeah.
I would like to see us have a strategy of eliminating as many signs on the island as is possible. We have signs everywhere.
Good luck.
Yeah. And people still don't adhere to them. So
You know,
Uh-oh.
there we go. Yeah.
that is kind of a common, again, kind of a push and pull between, I remember when the reducing or the limitation of non-resident parking back in the neighborhood, and I don't know what the number was, but it seems like it was over 400 signs. But it basically required that number of signs to get it done. So I guess it was just seen as a necessary evil, the kind of trade-off between the visual clutter and getting less congestion on the road. It was, it's definitely an issue.
Is there any opportunity for us to have markings on the road as opposed to signs? I mean, I was always taught if there's a yellow marking on the curb, you couldn't park there. Can we put yellow markings instead of all the signs and just alert people that if it's yellow, you can't park there. If it's blue, it's residential. If it's white, you're free to park.
that assumes that you have a curb.
Well, you could put it on the street. They're paved streets.
I have noticed, well, and I know that here recently the police department has been putting red stripes on the intersections where you can't park from here to the intersection. They're doing that now. But I also do remember from the same conversation that basically you could not enforce the parking limitations without the signs. We could certainly, we have a different chief. I think it's all derived from state law, so I think the answer would be the same. But we could ask the chief of police that same question. I do know that our old chief of police felt strongly that he could not enforce parking limitations without the signs.
Well, maybe that would be a good question to pose to him. Is there a way for us to eliminate any of the traffic signs and still allow you to enforce the rules?
I will do that. I'll send him a note.
I don't want to muddy the waters too much, but just as I scanned through these, I was thinking of the idea of a bit of a restructure with the goals. I mean, where I'm going with that is I hear a lot of safety topics right now, and I kind of feel like that should be a top level goal, is to improve pedestrian vehicle interactive safety, and then maybe have another that has to do with strictly the congestion issue, and then maybe a third that has to do with flow of traffic, and then another that has to do with parking.
So a new 8.1 to basically move the existing 8.1 to 8.2, and the new 8.1 is improve. Do we want to improve, or do we want public safety?
Enhance.
Enhance.
Or optimized.
There you go.
We have consensus there. Push all these down, add a new first goal, which is to improve, enhance, and optimize, one of those good words, public safety on the roadways.
Yes.
I think I see everybody's head nodding, so we'll do that.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to throw a wrench in the system here. I feel like maybe some of these strategies could be organized into different headings a little better.
So it was enhance public safety on the roadways. Is that it, Marty? Does that capture it, the goal? Or improve?
Yeah, I mean, this is the transportation section, so say public safety. I don't want to. Maybe something more specific, like improve traffic safety for motorists and pedestrians, or maybe something less specific. I don't know. Open to ideas there.
I guess the goal 8.1, is that really what it says, or should that be where you improve safety or optimize safety? And then how you do that is one way is by traffic flow, another way is congestion.
Seems like one, I mean, I would take that to mean Marty's goal is to make it safe first and foremost. And then I think this existing 8.1 is more about keeping the traffic moving.
Yep.
We're almost at odds with each other. One is, and I guess that's the correct order to say, above all, we want them to be safe. Below that, we also want them to be, efficiently flowing.
Yeah, and I really think that congestion or capacity is a separate one altogether. That really doesn't have to be interrelated with traffic flow.
So, Marty, are you thinking that's a third? That one is safety, the second one is flow, and the third one is congestion?
Yeah, just a idea, just spitballing it. So maybe we get into this and it doesn't work, but yeah, I was thinking that might be a better way to organize it.
Because I guess congestion gets to both, it gets to both safety and flow. I would think that it basically is a strategy that would enhance both of those goals in my mind.
Did we lose Ron?
Ron has been coming and going, and I think.
Yeah, I've been having internet issues.
Ron, so just for the benefit of the group, I'm new at this, but it does put you in some kind of waiting room, and it requires, it's on my machine, it's a hidden screen that tells me you're in the waiting room. Eventually, it pops up. I apologize if.
Nope.
He's in timeout.
I was using my cell phone for a little while, but it was hard to hold on to a phone and try to read I've got two computer screens to kind of deal with. It's all good now.
We don't want to lose you.
Is this one, would we like to pick the chief's brain, or so on this one, I do know that we have, the police chief is certainly more plugged in than I. Also, we have used, we have a traffic engineer that we've used for, they basically create the documentation to submit to the DOT for all of the parking plans that have been developed over the years. Stantec is that group. Is this one that we want to get some input from some outside brains on this one?
I would think so. I would think the fire department as well.
You have to spend some money.
Right. But what Marty's saying is, it's a good idea. I just was thinking too, you may even be able to leave that 8.1, but add some language that says improve traffic flow in a safe manner, and then go on reduce congestion on roadways in the islands, and then pick it up in your strategies somewhere. I don't know if that hits it, Marty, for you, but.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, certainly, I think there's several ways to look at this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, I think I was kind of going the same direction as Vince, maybe kind of hit in on the strategies to get to those goals.
Right.
So,
So does improved traffic safety for, say, pedestrians, bikers, and motorists become a strategy under the old or the existing 8.1 goal? Does that satisfy?
um,
I don't know, I'm just kind of following what Vince was suggesting. Is that instead of making it a separate goal like Marty was suggesting, are we saying put it as a strategy under the existing goal?
I tell you what, tell me if you all agree, but on this one, I'm thinking that we hold tight for a minute.
All right.
I think we're talking about kind of sea change shifts here. Why don't we talk to the experts, ask them some questions about what they think, and then resume talks on, because I think I'm seeing several different directions it could go. And I think we could probably use some help on that.
Well, when you were mentioning reaching out to those different entities, the police department, the fire department, traffic engineers, I think what we're getting at is potentially a study, a traffic study, or several different studies, one that's emergency vehicle focused. And so maybe those are strategies. And
Well,
they're not something that can be done quickly, but rather things that might take a little time.
I think I was thinking that we would talk to them and just see out of those discussions with them, I would think it would become obvious that, hey, it's, you're kind of doing all that you can do and we'll continue to press forward. Or it may bubble out that, yes, you need to do a study to help this matter. And if we need to do a study, then I think it gets put in there as a strategy, and then we continue on with the plan. But that's kind of where I was going. It's either it's kind of minor tweaking that they could help us through and get us comfortable with it, or they look at it and they say, it's kind of so jumbled that we think you need a fresh look at it and kind of a long look at it. And then I think we're at the point where we would have some kind of study done. And I don't know, we could actually review what, so Stantec, when they did their initial study, they did do a lot of work, including full island traffic counts on busy weekends. So they have a lot of background data from the initial study that maybe it would be good to just have them summarize what they found. Now that data is probably 5 or 6 years old.
Is that public domain?
Yes. Yeah. I've actually looked for it recently. It's come up, just traffic, just generally. And I haven't been able to find it, but I know they have it. I know Stuart Day at Stantec did it back then, and he's still there. So I know we
Oh,
have,
if Stewart did it, then it's no good.
I'll tell him you said that. Rick, I guess, Rick Day was the kind of lead on it.
Yeah, I'd be interested to look at that as well. I mean, the thought, one of the thoughts that's spurring some of this is, you know, we had a lot of busy Saturdays this beginning of the summer, more so than usual, and you know, it was obvious to see traffic stacked up in a way that was thwarting, you know, your access or egress from the island. I mean, we do have a single point here, two, but really just one. So I couldn't help but have the thought, if I'd had a heart attack on one of those Saturdays, I probably would have just died before I got to the hospital. So, you know,
Well,
I think it's.
We do have kind of the interesting case of the study that they did previously was when it was a completely open system. So you could, you know, if it got a little bit congested on Palm, you would just turn down an avenue and just start going down the avenue. We have incrementally squeezed the tube of toothpaste so that it has, you know, I think we're kind of getting to the point where, you know, there's always been an interest in reducing the amount of spaces, but at some point that becomes problematic for the flow of traffic. And so it is a very different scenario that they would be looking at and analyzing now than it was when they actually did their work.
Yeah, no, that's what my hunch is, or was, when I thought of this, was that it is a safety concern, and it is directly related to a capacity issue. You know, there's a maximum amount of vehicles that the island can hold. What's that magic number?
I don't think so. I think everybody thinks it's infinite.
Well, I mean, to the comment earlier, I think it used to be somewhat infinite. I mean, we never hit the point. In the last few years, we now hit the point.
Yeah.
So it does. We hit that point, and then it's what happens after we hit the point. I don't think anybody's leaving. I think they're then kind of creating other issues for the community.
Douglas, do we track traffic volumes? Like this summer, have we been doing car counts coming in and out of the island?
I will have to. We used to. We had embedded traffic counts, and that's a good question for the chief. The DOT and the Council of Governments would do kind of seasonal counts, but we had permanent daily counters installed. But honestly, I don't know if the new chief, I don't know. I don't know that we're still, I haven't seen those numbers for a while. I know they used to be reported to public safety.
That's not an expensive line item, is it? I mean, is that something that maybe a question to the chief would be, should we have that? It kind of gives a bolster to the volume and capacity that Marty and everybody else is talking about.
Well, yesterday they approved the camera for down at Breach Inlet. And it's expensive because you got to run power to it. And
the camera's not going to be a count. I mean, we're talking just counters on the ground, aren't we?
well, I know the Mount Pleasant cameras will count. And they'll differentiate between cars and trucks.
Okay.
So if it was an option and the camera cost, I don't know, $10,000 or $12,000 now, maybe a few bucks more, you could be counting.
Yeah.
Rick, are you saying that you know that they had the counters, or you don't know the cameras?
I want to say I know because I've been to their traffic center, Mount Pleasant. It's really amazing.
No, I'm talking about the cameras that were just approved. They include.
I doubt it. I doubt they do.
It was meant to, Douglas, that the way that Chief Cornett presented that was a measure of safety, that it would be monitored by the fire department and used to more quickly respond to incidents at Breach Inlet.
Oh.
Yeah, but that's by looking.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, it may be that.
So I guess the question is, does it have that capability? Do any of our cameras have that capability?
Yeah, we ought to ask.
Well, and it could be that we already have the capability, because I know that we had embedded counters at one time. I just don't know that we still have them. And I have a suspicion that they're no longer functional, but I don't know that for certain.
Well, the thing is, if you're going to pop $15,000 for a camera, why not add a little bit more and count as well? You know,
Yeah, right.
Well, maybe these are all things that could be part of these strategies. And
Right.
I think the obvious thing here is that it is a more robust topic at this point, and maybe we just need to hit the refresh button on some of the data that we already have, but maybe it needs to be more of a focused effort. So, all right, I'm not trying to belabor this, and I know we took a long time last time, but I think this one's important. So,
Great.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, I mean, to me, this is, and we kind of said this at the onset, that this is clearly one of the elements that is lacking in the plan. I mean, it's a fairly weak element, and it's a pretty major issue for the island. So I think that this one, and I think it's why we started kind of with this, and the two that we're talking about now seem to have need the most attention. So
Mm-hmm.
why don't we plan on trying to get our traffic engineer and our police chief, and if you would like to have the fire chief, we could get
yeah,
her also at the see if we can get them to sit in on the next meeting.
Hey,
All right.
Douglas, I just emailed you the parking plan that Stan Tech gave us, but that was back in 2014. I don't know if there's been one updated since then or not.
No, that's it.
That had some good information in it.
Actually, it was eye-opening. A lot of what was in there.
Bill, did you send that to all of us or just to Douglas?
Yeah, I think I sent it to everybody. Did you get it?
That's great. Yeah, it'd be great if you could.
You got it.
So are we good? Do we want to continue, or do we feel like we have enough that has sidetracked us from continuing to wait until next?
I think it sounds like we've got to get input from the outside. So for us to muddle through this ourselves is probably a little fruitless.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And just what you said, Douglas, this is a hot button right now. And so it's important that we get this right.
Yeah.
agreed.
All right. So we'll delay. We will pause on this one, get some outside help, and go back to it next month. Do we want, if there's not anything else in the comp plan, we ready to talk about the tree fund?
Yeah, one thing on the comp plan, just so it doesn't get lost, doesn't fall through the cracks, is I looked at a couple comp plans on the internet, and all of them seem to have had professional support getting them put together, presentation wise. And some of them are huge.
Yeah.
But hopefully we're not going down that direction. But just something to remember that, we may at some point in time want to start looking for somebody to help us out, turn this into a physical product.
Well,
I think that's a good idea, Rick, if we can get it.
So in my experience, so you're right, Rick, there's huge, and if you look at, various communities' plans, you clearly have those that are pretty highly polished, and a good example to just follow along with, as I had mentioned, Somerville, they are in the exact, well, they're about a year ahead of us. They've kind of just taken a first pass at edits, and they're getting input now. And I can actually send everybody what kind of their first pass. And I think we started at this point, but it's probably good to periodically go back to it. But I think from what I've seen, folks either farm it out or and basically they farm out all of it. And I think they do typically come up with very good, pretty polished products. Or they kind of do them in-house and you can kind of tell, and they kind of look like ours. If you look at Kiowa or you look at Folly Beach, you know, they're very much kind of have the same homemade DIY look that ours has. But I don't know if, so the Somerville Plan, just out of curiosity, I looked at the cost of that. It was $200,000. But I actually was kind of surprised that it was that low. I mean, when you look at it, it is a very professional looking plan, a lot of polish to it. I don't know, in reading what I read, I don't know that there's that much more kind of meat to it. There's a lot of you know, it's definitely good looking, and it has some creative ideas that get put out by.
Sorry, Douglas, how much did you say that was?
200,000.
This is for formatting a plan, or they must have been doing
No.
content? Oh, okay.
I guess that was the point. I see people either go fully farmed out, or I see them fully do it in-house. I think what Rick is saying is kind of, we do the meat to it, and then somebody adds maps and graphics.
Yeah.
Polish it. Okay.
Well, the strategic plan for Norfolk was good looking. That came from the Riley Foundation, right?
Yes.
And so that was not that much money.
Well, and that's also
Folly Beach did theirs internally. Folly Beach's plan looks nice. Did they do it internally?
I think they did. I think they probably. I think they did. Yes, it does not have that.
Sullivan's looks good too. Yeah.
Is that something Nicole could help us with, Douglas? Could Nicole do some of that work?
I'm sorry, one more time, Bill.
Could Nicole do some of this?
I don't think that's in her. I don't think that's her. I don't think that's her work. The kind of polish, Bill, is what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think that's what she did. I could ask her. She may. She's a very talented person. She may. The Council of Governments, you know, they have helped us previously on mapping graphics. So they may be, if we wanted to pursue the idea of the Planning Commission doing the bulk of the writing or the thinking, and then have them format it, I would think the Council of Governments would be one that we could talk to. But I don't know. I kind of wonder about the idea of fully farming it out. You know, I think we've talked about it each step. You know, I know it's a fair amount of money.
Don't you think this plan is likely to be revised once they go through the strategic planning process? I mean, aren't we kind of doing this and in 2 or 3 years it's going to get redone anyway?
Well, so I think so the strategic plan process is going to start and end before our process ends. And the two should be kind of dovetailed together. So I think that once that product, we would make our modifications to the plan once the strategic plan is basically finished. They're envisioning a 6-month project for the strategic plan. And by our schedule, we're kind of halfway through the elements at that time.
What's the budget for that? Do you know?
I think it was 20,000, 20 or 30, something like that. Not a lot, you know, in looking at what they provide.
You know, from my experience, if you get early on, get the council or somebody to approve budgeting for this, even if it's next year. It's a heck of a lot easier than coming to an end and then trying to get it financed. It wouldn't be a bad idea to start putting a flag up, maybe to Desiree, that, down the road, we may need some money to help us close this thing out.
So not the idea of basically getting a firm on board to do it or to walk us through it. You're saying we continue to walk through it and then just have them add graphics in the end?
Or some combination.
It's gonna take some design software like Adobe InDesign, or
Yeah.
what's the other one? If you want one that's gonna look like that Norfolk example.
Well, they got the Norfolk probably for 20 grand, right? Including all the all the walking around too. And it's a good looking piece of product, I think.
Yeah, I'm just saying that somebody's gonna have to take the whole document to put it together and
Yeah.
get that final product. They're gonna have to reformat the whole thing, not just add some graphics or pictures.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I didn't want to digress, but something to think about.
So we're not hearing farm it out at this point.
No.
Not the whole thing.
Not the whole thing. Yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
Otherwise, this falls on you, Douglas. Is one of your staff people work on this?
My people, yeah, I have all my people working.
Your
on it.
people?
A hat's in the bottom right drawer over there. But it'd be interesting to see how much worth city council would put forward to the end product in terms of dollars if they had to pay for it. Just curious.
We talked a lot about the drainage master plan, which I think is in the magnitude of, what we're talking about. So I don't know. Like you say, it'd be an interesting exercise to just kind of see the value that they would.
Right. It's more of an underlying document than one that really comes out there forcefully and just, would they pay 200 grand for that? I mean, I'm kind of cheap, so I wouldn't, but I wouldn't mind having something that does read, a little bit more easily. So then you have a better chance of it perhaps getting read.
don't we want to look at what are we trying to solve for? If it's a more I think where you're going around, it's a more user-friendly document with some graphics, maybe get it so it's a little interactive online for people to look at it versus what it is today. Just bring it up to current technology.
Right.
See that being a huge heavy lift.
Right.
If we get the right person that knows the technology and the graphics.
Sure. So liking it in architecture, our comprehensive plan looks like the specs, and no one wants to read those. They want to look at the pretty pictures of the drawings. And so if you could funnel the two together, you've got a package that somebody would be enticed to read. And why is that graphic there? And then there's the storyline adjacent to it. It would be certainly more.
We want people to read it. Yeah.
Yeah, you want people to read it.
Onward and upward, Chairman.
Okay. Have we exhausted that topic for today?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go on to, wait, what are we going to try to cover next time? What strategy, what goals are we going to try to cover for the next meeting?
So I think we're going to spend the next meeting. So by my count, we'll have 3 guests to talk about just transportation. So I think that's enough. That in and of itself will take up a meeting.
No.
Yeah.
That's a month.
All right, if we're tired out on that one, we'll go on to the tree fund. And did that share, are you all seeing just a Word document on your screen about?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yes.
So we got into this a little bit. The city council has asked for your input on the tree fund and the use of the money in the tree fund. And if you see there on the screen, I don't know why it's done that, but currently the code, and it's there on your screen, restricts how that money can be used to solely being for beautification of public property as determined by city council. I think there were some ideas kind of tossed around about, maybe at least the city could use it more freely. I mean, maybe it doesn't have to be limited to just beautification. Maybe it could be used for things like drainage pipes, or, there was pretty far spanning ideas as to what it could go for. It could just go into the general fund to go towards whatever they see fit. That's kind of one avenue. The other ideas that were kicked around were, how about it could be used on private property, and maybe the money would get stretched a little bit if it was put into kind of a competitive matching grant, where an owner could come to the city and say, hey, I would really like to do this, that, or the other. Maybe a drainage improvement that would benefit an area, or maybe trees that would beautify an area, and the city would either give grants or give a matching grant that would lead to some money being spent on private property. So they're kind of all over the board on it. I think we talked about last month the idea of maybe it could be used to acquire green space. It's one of our goals in the comprehensive plan is to acquire green space. So maybe that ordinance could be cracked a little bit more to at least allow green space acquisition. So that's the issue, and it's pretty broad. See if there's any thoughts or comments from you all.
Douglas, being a little new to this, so am I to understand how much, well, first of all, remind us how much is in the fund right now?
I think that it's somewhere around 50,000. It's not a huge amount of money.
And it doesn't grow very quickly, does it? It's
correct. Yeah, it's
so tree fund is the source, and this says that it can be used for beautification. I guess I didn't realize the word was beautification. Is that a pretty broad something for discretion by the city council, as long as it's going towards improvement of the public property?
Well, I mean, I don't know how broad that is. I mean, I guess
It doesn't have to go to a tree. It could go to a park bench, or it could go to
yeah. I think that's correct.
Or something. Okay.
My mind always goes to drainage pipes, which I don't know that he thinks is beautiful.
Drainage is beautiful, yeah.
So the only issue, and I know we barely talked about it last time, but is the first part of that section in 5-4-66. I just called it up. So the way that sentence reads, it lends itself to a lot of different ideas for sure, but the preceding sentence or two describes how, I'll just read it. In situations where tree replacement on the same property is impossible or undesirable, as determined by the zoning administrator, the owner shall either donate such tree or trees as would otherwise be required by this article to the city to be planted at the owner's expense on such public property as city council shall direct, or pay a fee to the city equal to 100% of the fair market cost of the trees that would have been required to be replanted at the site, plus the cost of replanting. So I think it opens it up, but it also implies that the whole intent and the reason that people are paying these fees in the first place is to replace the tree. So I think we just got to be careful there that we're not bending that into something that people are going to flag as illogical.
I would agree with Marty. So that's kind of why I would vote for the do nothing. I mean, that focuses us on just doing those beautification projects, including probably planting trees and other things.
To replace them, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, the point from a user standpoint, or someone who is paying for the tree fund, is the notion of calling it the tree fund, because they presume tree for tree, and if we just, and in the ordinance it's not referred to as a tree fund. We just been calling that, in our world, in this meeting, it's become the slang. Maybe we should refer to it as the nature fund or something. If we want to relate tree to tree, certainly the first part of that clause, there's not any other place on the island. If I wanted to take down a 6 or an 18-inch oak tree, there's no place I could find on the island where we plant one on the city's property that the city would even want. So it comes down to spending the replacement cost of those trees, of that tree. But if there's never that misconception that it's going to be used for trees, but would go to the general beautification of the island, I think that'd be a little bit more palatable, just to not, assume tree for tree. Mount Pleasant does the same thing. They do plant trees, and that's why it's hard to find replacement trees on this island. Places like Mount Pleasant and Somerville are buying every 4-inch oak tree that's around to stick on the highways. But I think we don't have a shortage of trees on the island, really, for new planting. So there are plenty of other needs in our public spaces. And should there be a catastrophe where we lose a tree, we would have that funding to replant if that's what we desire to do.
So are you recommending the do nothing as well, Ron?
Other than to stop calling it the tree fund.
Okay, yeah.
So just another point of information here. I did some quick research on this too, and called around, and the cost of replacement for a 4-inch caliper, which is the city's code, equates to about a 12 to 15 foot tall live oak. That would be about $700 installed. The cost of a 10-inch caliper, 25 foot tall live oak, is about $3,600. So you get, if you wanted to replace some larger trees and do a more direct kind of comparison there, I mean, the cost can get pretty high. So.
Yeah.
Ron, are you going to put your idea in the form of a motion?
Wait, well, before you go there, wait a minute. Let me just throw out some other food for thought.
Well, that doesn't mean we can't change. We don't have a discussion, but we don't really have a motion, do we?
No. I guess you all know that the looks like we're going to get a restaurant down at the marina. And as part of that, probably there's going to be some dock space. The intercoastal dock space is going to be freed up. And as I understand it, the thought process there is to make that a residence dock, where residents can go down there and fish and launch their, not launch their boats, but canoes or whatever. And there's no funding for that. That's going to be something that's going to have to go downstream after all the dust is settled from what's going on at the marina. But it's just a thought, this money could be used to kickstart that as well. Just a thought.
And I would see that as falling under the do nothing.
That's correct.
Yeah, the money would be able to be allocated there, Rick. I think if we could get council we could recommend that for council.
Well, I think it would be great. I mean, I've been waiting 20 years for it.
I do too, yeah. I'm with you on that.
Maybe that's, I think you're all kind of sounds like you're all coming to the same conclusion, and I would just say that at the end of the day, no matter kind of how you look at it, it's not a huge pot of money, and to some degree, because it's not a bigger pot of money, it gets forgotten about a little bit. It's sitting there, and it we do trim the palm trees out of that fund, but I think as soon as a sizable project is identified, it will go very quickly. I mean, I think the entire fund could be depleted at the marina, and pretty quick order if that was a recommendation.
Yep.
There has been talk about there's the fund could get. There are cases still kind of lingering out there that could lead to the fund being, two or three times the size of what it is now.
Ooh,
So, it's not a big amount now. I guess it potentially could be more than it currently is pretty quickly.
Oh,
when we had the residents, with that little party we had about what they'd like to see, residential dock was there. I mean, it was one of the top wants.
Now, I don't know if a dock, I don't know, Rick, if you're saying a dock is a beautification project.
I
All
think
around.
you're talking about the surround up to it, aren't you, Rick? Yeah.
Exactly.
Is leading to it, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be a good kickstart for sure.
Hey,
What about-
Rick, has anybody ever talked about doing that sort of project off of 25th or 21st?
Oh, no, not really. I think 25th used to be at one time it was a ramp, wasn't it?
Not officially, unofficially. There has been a little bit of a history of residents being aggravated by the use of 25th as access to Goat Island traditionally.
Oh,
When you said residents fishing dock, it's those two spots came to mind as well. Just curious.
So it sounds like there are plenty of opportunities to beautify.
yeah, there is.
So I think I'm hearing around the idea of not changing anything. And maybe if you were to send that in the form of a recommendation, you might add the language to say that you support beautification of the marina public space, the public
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Well, should we vote on it?
Make your motion.
Doug, you want to read it back?
So the motion would be to forward a recommendation to City Council to not change the ordinance as it currently reads, and to consider directing money from the tree fund towards beautifying the public space that could come available to residents at the marina adjacent to a future dock.
Yep.
yep.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I will.
Ron's back and go ahead.
We did lose Nicole to real property, so I'm doing my best to describe this.
Yeah, that's fine. That's good.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. I think that would be pretty neat.
Great.
All right.
Sure.
Having a hard time. So next item on the agenda, update on drainage planning. The city council did approve Thomas and Hutton's. They gave us a proposal to handle the administration, construction administration, and bidding for the small projects, what we call the high impact internal projects. And they've just been kind of cut free to do that work here in the last week. You all requested, maybe it was 2 meetings ago, requested to review that bidding package. And I do plan on forwarding that when I get it for comments. I don't know that there is an interest in getting that work. That work is already about 6 months behind schedule, and they are laying out their schedule for getting the requests out on the street and getting a contractor under agreement. And they don't have they're not leaving a lot of spare time in there. So depending on when I get it and when the next council meeting is, I don't know what the opportunity to really give feedback other than just directly to me. So what I would envision is I'm going to send it out to everybody. If you see a need to call a special meeting over it, I guess we could do that. Otherwise, if you just have kind of individual comments on the request, send them to me and I'll forward them to the engineer, and they can incorporate whatever comments you may have. So that one's moving along steadily. The bigger project, we are still trying to, we really need to sort out how we're crossing the golf course. There's been some challenges to get a clear agreement from Wild Dunes. We basically have to get the blessing of Wild Dunes on whatever we're doing to go across that golf course. And it's not that they're not agreeable to it. It's just taking time to get them up to speed on it. And I think their management is out of California, so it kind of goes a little bit going back and forth on that one. But that one's progressing. So that one's moving forward. They still have the fine tuning on the design to do, but we really need the feedback from the golf course on that too.
What about the permits? Did they get the permits?
Yes, for the small projects they have the larger projects are submitted, but they've told us there's about a year wait on that. So they're in and they're under review of some type. So that's all I have on the drainage. Any questions about those? And then next thing on the agenda is the short-term rental recommendations. That is council, that was actually on council's agenda last month, but because the public hearing hadn't been properly advertised, they delayed that. So that will be again on August for final reading and ratification. So that'll close that one out hopefully here in a couple of weeks.
How's your software doing?
So the software did well. It got, I don't know that we talked about this, but they have always forewarned that the second year was going to cost us 3 times the amount that the first year cost us. We did, it's up for renewal, and they sent us an agreement to extend for a year, and it was slightly more than the first year.
Oh.
So it went from like 13,500 to 15,000 instead of 50, which is what they had warned us against.
Well, that's great, Douglas. Yeah.
Yeah, times have changed.
Yeah, so council executed that or has agreed to that extension, so we'll have the benefit of that for another year. So we did do, some analysis. It easily paid for itself, which was good. Unfortunately, in the year that we had it, I would say it was only really functional for probably half of that time, where it was doing what it needed to do. And then it came to the this renewal period and the licenses expiring and the start of a new license year. So this year we will have, hopefully the system will be operational kind of from the initial license date. And we will also have, the city has hired a new enforcement officer who has a focus on not necessarily rental licenses, but business licenses.
Great.
But he'll be handling a lot of the kind of follow-up, which we think that there's about 50 that are out there that are kind of operating under the radar. So, but you start getting to a point where it will take significant resources to just kind of bird dog those 50. And so we have that person identified. So I think we're going to be in better shape this year than we were last.
Great.
The only other thing I wanted to talk about, and we kind of talked about it earlier, is just to gauge whether or not there was an interest in anybody meeting together in September, or if you want to just continue as we've done, or what the interest level was there. Or do you want, if you want to just decide, there's really not a reason to, I mean, you can decide later to see what the numbers do. Hopefully this downward trend will continue. But that's the only other thing. Next month it will not take much for me to kind of set up a virtual room where some could be there in person and some could be in remote. So just give that some thought. If you want to do that, I think we could easily start doing that next month.
You want to see what the interest from other committees might be in doing the same thing? Or are they not?
From what I hear, council, I don't think there's any interest in council doing that. I did kind of gauge with Desiree if she felt like there was interest anywhere else, and I perceive that it's really not there on any other committee.
Okay.
But hopefully, like I said, hopefully things will continue to improve and people will it'll be a little less daunting to meet in person going forward.
The Big Ten doesn't think so.
Who doesn't?
Big Ten.
Big
Ten and Pac-12.
Yeah. Wait till these kids get back to school.
Yeah. I guess our meeting would be about at that same time, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll wait and see. Just know that that we could do it, and we will. I don't know. I don't know if it makes it better or worse, the fact that we're going to start kind of having people attend our meetings. Maybe they would be, not knowing all of you, maybe they'd be less likely to participate than they would via Zoom. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
You guys are kind of dangerous characters in the minds of
I know where you're going with that.
Thanks for that vote of confidence.
I'm just about to say you did a great job at this meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Up in the end.
One more time.
That's all I have.
Hey, Douglas, I was going to add one other thing, and hopefully I'll try to be quick. I was thinking miscellaneous business was the right spot for it, but maybe not. Let me know. I think you had mentioned in either the last meeting or the meeting before something about the ordinance, and then it's kind of a two-pronged comment or question, but It came from the Forest Trail subdivision
Yeah.
issue. I think you had mentioned an ordinance that had a typo or something that may require another reading before it was accepted. Does that ring a bell?
Yes. So that is the lot coverage. It went to 35, then a version of an ordinance got ratified that had it going back to 40, but it was a typo. That too is with council, and it had the same, it was up for second reading in their last meeting, but that public hearing didn't get properly advertised. So that will be finalized and ratified at the end of this month.
Okay. Okay. Well, so I'm not sure the appropriate progression or what the interest level would even be or the history behind this, but it also came from that Forest Trail subdivision. In that packet that you sent, I noticed that there was several mentions of swimming pools being not considered as impervious surfaces or counting towards that percentage.
No, they count. Pools count against you as impervious.
Okay. Whatever I read, it was to the contrary. So I support that notion, but I took exception to what I was reading and I thought it was the opposite of that. So I was just going to say, if they are not considered impervious, I would open that for discussion because I would consider them impervious.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have always considered them impervious. We do now require that their surrounds be pervious. And I think that I recall seeing a site plan that showed a pervious pool deck, but didn't have the pool laid out on it. And that might be what that is. But we do, pools have to fit into the impervious limit. And the other thing is people constantly get the wrong word. They will say
right
impervious when they mean pervious. So I don't know if there was a typo, or I don't know what that was.
Let me circle back and look at the documentation that I'm referring to, and I'll get it to you in an email. But I mean, that clarification helps me for sure. But I don't know.
I think I do remember there being a section that said pervious pool surround. I think that was talking, and then it didn't have the actual pool shown in to take out the impervious portion of it. But we definitely count pools as impervious.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's.
You'd have a hard time keeping the water levels.
Yeah, people have, pool manufacturers do try to make the argument that it's not running the water off of the pool.
Right.
But we've never.
Well, that actually refreshes my memory. I think it was referred to as a closed system, so they didn't want to count it towards impervious surfaces, and that's really not relevant to the topic. Right. For it's
that debate is made to us, but we've never not counted them. But yes, people will frequently say, well, it's not running any water off, which, like you say, is not germane to
it's about groundwater and infiltration. And right. So, okay, well, I'll look back and make sure I got my ducks in a row there. My thinking was, if that ordinance is open and editable and going to be reviewed, that I wanted to talk about that while we had the chance. So
we've definitely always considered them impervious.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Any motions?
I'll go ahead and make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're closed.
All right, thank you all. Have a good night.
Adios, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.